My stepdad abandoned me in the hospital to go to his son's graduation party. I called my dad. CPS got involved when my mom tried to make me lie for her social media image. Dominic, my stepfather, makes my skin crawl. He's easily the most controlling, judgmental, and disrespectful person I've ever had to deal with. Since he married my mother 16 months ago, my entire life has been flipped inside out. I still remember the day my mother showed me her Instagram post announcing their engagement, her beaming with her perfectly applied makeup, and him standing there with his arm around her waist like he'd just won some kind of trophy. The forced smile on my face in that photo took everything I had. My followers commented, "What a beautiful family," without knowing the reality behind the screen. My parents split up 3 years ago. Mom and Dad argued constantly, their personalities clashing over practically everything. When they finally announced they were divorcing, I felt more relief than surprise. They had never really clicked, not in any way that mattered. They tried making the marriage work for years, but the tension never disappeared, especially regarding household responsibilities. While my mother was technically a stay-at-home parent on paper, she despised anything resembling traditional domestic duties. Cooking meals, keeping the house clean, or helping with my homework never made it to the top of her priority list. She made zero effort to hide how much she hated those mundane tasks, as she called them. Instead, she devoted nearly every waking hour to her phone, obsessively trying to build her following on social media. Vanessa Parker, beauty influencer extraordinaire. At least, that's what her bio claimed, despite her modest following of about 25,000. She was constantly recording tutorials, unboxing PR packages, or staging elaborate photo shoots in our living room. When she wasn't glued to her screen, she blew through Dad's money on shopping sprees, fancy brunches with other wannabe influencers, and endless beauty treatments. These weren't occasional indulgences. This was her daily routine. "I need to maintain my image," she'd snap whenever Dad questioned the credit card statements. "This is an investment in our future." Mom never fit into that nurturing mother stereotype you see everywhere. While my friends' parents checked homework and attended school events, my mother's primary focus remained firmly on herself. She obsessed over her appearance and constantly critiqued mine, pushing me to stay thin and presentable at all times. "You're an extension of my brand, Eliza," she'd say while scrutinizing my outfit choices. It was like I existed solely as a reflection of her image, rather than as a person with my own identity and needs. After the divorce, I shuffled between two households with shared custody. Just as I was finally adjusting to this new normal, balancing school and my part-time job at the local cafe while working on my photography portfolio, my mother met Dominic at some networking event for digital entrepreneurs. She was completely infatuated from their first date. Within days, they were officially a couple, and after barely 3 weeks, I was forced to meet him over an excruciating dinner where they couldn't keep their hands off each other. Suddenly, this total stranger was everywhere in our space, rearranging furniture, implementing house rules, and criticizing everything from our grocery choices to my photography equipment cluttering the dining table. I was expected to welcome him with open arms into our lives. Maybe if Dominic had been a decent human being, I could have accepted him eventually. But he's anything but. "Your camera gear is taking up too much space," he declared one morning, shoving my carefully arranged equipment into a box. "The dining room isn't your personal studio." Meanwhile, his son's gaming setup dominated the entire living room, their controllers and snack wrappers scattered everywhere without comment. Starting the new school year, this spring, Dominic came home with big news. He'd been promoted to senior project manager at his tech company, and his smug expression told me he was about to make a grand announcement. "I've decided we're all going to celebrate by taking a family vacation," he declared, standing in our living room like he was giving a corporate presentation. It'll be the perfect opportunity for us to bond as a real family. My heart actually skipped a beat with excitement, despite everything. We hadn't gone on a proper vacation in forever, and secretly, I thought maybe this could be a chance for things to improve between us all. Even Lucas and Ethan seemed genuinely pleased, high-fiving each other about missing school. Vanessa immediately pulled out her phone, already planning Instagram posts. "We'll need matching outfits for the beach photos," she gushed, scrolling through her favorite boutiques online. Dominic and Mom spent the next few weeks planning everything down to the minute: flights, resort bookings, excursions. I noticed Lucas and Ethan got input on activities, while I was simply informed of the itinerary by a family group chat message. The day before our departure, disaster struck. Mom and I were driving back from the mall after picking up last-minute vacation items when a truck rear-ended our car at a stoplight. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it was violent enough to jolt us forward and then snap us back against our seats. My head cracked against the passenger window, and my arm twisted painfully as I instinctively tried to brace myself. "My followers are going to freak when they see this," Mom gasped, already taking photos of the damage for her Instagram story while I sat dazed, my vision blurring. The paramedics arrived quickly, determining that Mom had escaped with minor scrapes and bruises. I wasn't as lucky. My right arm had suffered a complex fracture that would require surgery, and the emergency room doctor confirmed I had a moderate concussion after running several neurological tests. "Look at the camera, Eliza." Mom kept whispering between medical evaluations, trying to get me to pose for a hospital selfie. "We need to document this for the followers." When Dominic arrived at the hospital, he rushed in with what initially looked like genuine concern. "Is everyone okay?" "What happened?" he asked, placing his hand on Vanessa's shoulder while barely glancing my way. Within minutes, however, his real priorities emerged. "So what does this mean for our trip? Can we still make the flight tomorrow?" "We're talking about non-refundable tickets here. That's over $5,000. Dr. Myers, a colleague of my father's, as I would later learn, examined my test results carefully. "Eliza will need to remain hospitalized for at least 72 hours for observation," she explained, pointing to specific areas on my brain scan. "With a concussion of this severity, we need to monitor for potential complications. The orthopedic surgeon has scheduled her for surgery tomorrow morning to properly set the fractured radius and ulna." I watched Dominic's face contort with irritation, his eyes narrowing as he glared at me like I'd crashed the car intentionally. "This is just perfect timing, isn't it?" he muttered under his breath. "I can stay with her," Mom offered half-heartedly, already scrolling through her phone to check cancellation policies. The reluctance in her voice was unmistakable. Dominic immediately jumped in. "That's completely unnecessary, Vanessa. The hospital has professional staff for exactly this reason. Besides, we've already prepaid for everything: the resort, the excursions, Lucas's graduation celebration dinner. We'd be throwing money away for nothing." He turned to me with a condescending smile. "You're 16, not 6. The hospital is the safest place you could possibly be. Doctors and nurses everywhere, round-the-clock care. We'll arrange for someone to check on you when you're discharged, and you'll be fine until we get back." My stomach twisted into knots. The thought of being completely alone in the hospital, in pain, after surgery, made my eyes sting with tears. "Mom, please don't leave me here," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I really need you right now." "Well," Mom hesitated, glancing between Dominic and me. "This is exactly the problem with kids these days," Dominic interrupted, his voice rising. "They can't handle anything on their own. When I was your age, I had to deal with much worse. What if we called Dad?" I suggested desperately. "He could come stay with me, and you guys could still go on your trip." Dad lived about 3 hours away, but I knew he would come immediately if he understood the situation. Dominic scoffed loudly. That's ridiculous. Why would we bother Nathan with this? It's a minor concussion and a broken arm, not a life-threatening condition. The doctors said you'll recover just fine with rest. Besides, he added with a smirk, I'm sure your father is much too busy with his important hospital administration job to drop everything for something so trivial. What happened next still makes my heart sink when I think about it. I watched Mom's resolve crumble under Dominic's pressure. She glanced at her phone where notifications from her followers asking about our vacation plans were already piling up. Maybe Dominic is right, honey, she said finally. It's really just a few days, and the medical staff will take excellent care of you. I'll stay tonight, but we should probably stick to our plans tomorrow. Lucas has been looking forward to celebrating his graduation, and we've planned that special dinner at the resort. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was choosing a vacation and her stepson's celebration over staying with me after a serious accident. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain radiating from my broken arm. I'm scared, Mom, I admitted, hating how small my voice sounded. I've never had surgery before. For a brief moment, I saw conflict in her eyes. Then her phone buzzed again, and Dominic placed his hand firmly on her shoulder. We'll bring you back something nice, she promised, as if a souvenir could possibly make up for being abandoned in a hospital. That night, Mom did stay with me, though she spent most of the time updating her social media about our terrible accident and how it was affecting their family vacation plans. Her followers poured out sympathy, not for me, but for her inconvenience. The next morning after my surgery, still groggy from anesthesia, I woke to find Dominic standing in my hospital room, checking his watch impatiently. The car service is waiting downstairs, he told Mom. We need to leave now if we're going to make our flight. Mom kissed my forehead hastily. You'll be fine, sweetie. The nurses have my number if there's an emergency. And just like that, they left. The door clicked shut behind them, and I was completely alone, my arm throbbing despite the pain medication, my head pounding, and tears streaming down my face. After a day of lying alone in that sterile room with only occasional visits from busy nurses, I couldn't hold it together anymore. I broke down sobbing when Nurse Martinez came to check my vitals. Where's your family, honey? She asked, genuine concern in her eyes as she noticed there were no visitors or flowers in my room. They went on vacation, I managed between sobs. To celebrate my stepbrother's graduation. The shock and disapproval on her face confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how parents were supposed to act. Would you like me to call your mother? She offered, her clipboard clutched tightly as if restraining her anger. They won't answer, I said. But could you maybe call my dad instead? His name is Nathan Parker. She nodded, and I gave her his number, half expecting another disappointment. When Dad answered, I could hear his professional tone. He was clearly at work, but it instantly changed when the nurse explained the situation. Eliza is where? And Vanessa did what? His voice carried clearly through the phone. Put her on, please. When I took the phone, his voice was a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. Sweetheart, are you okay? The nurse says you've had surgery for a complex fracture, and you have a serious concussion. Is that true? Yes, I whispered, relief washing over me just hearing his voice. Mom and Dominic left this morning for their vacation. Lucas is graduating, and they had this special dinner planned. And they left you? Dad interrupted, his voice incredulous. Alone? After surgery? I explained everything, the accident, the diagnosis, Dominic's comments about wasting money, and Mom's ultimate decision to go anyway. There was a long silence, then Dad's voice, controlled but trembling with anger. Your mother told me you had a minor fender bender with some slight bruising. She never mentioned a concussion, broken bones, or surgery. She certainly didn't say they'd abandoned you in the hospital to go on vacation. The realization that Mom had deliberately misled Dad about my condition felt like another betrayal. I couldn't stop the fresh wave of tears. "Listen to me, Eliza," Dad said firmly. "I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 3 hours, maybe less. Don't worry about anything, okay? I'm coming to you." For the first time since the accident, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone was coming. Someone actually cared. As I sat there waiting, I realized just how desperately I needed genuine support in my life. The stark hospital lighting made everything feel unreal, but the abandonment was painfully real. When Dad finally walked through the door, less than 2 hours later, it felt like someone had lifted a crushing weight from my chest. I couldn't hold back the tears as he wrapped his arms around me, careful to avoid my bandaged arm. "I'm here now, Eliza," he whispered, his voice steady and reassuring. "Everything's going to be okay." The comfort of those simple words, spoken with absolute conviction, made me believe it might actually be true. Dad immediately shifted into professional mode, heading straight to the nurse's station. "I need to speak with my daughter's doctor immediately," he stated, his hospital administration ID badge visible on his belt clip. "I'm Nathan Parker, her father." I watched as Dr. Myers recognized him. "Nathan, I didn't realize this was your daughter. I'm handling Eliza's case." They spoke in rapid medical terms as the doctor showed him my charts, X-rays, and brain scans. Dad asked specific questions about the surgical procedure, post-operative care, and concussion management protocols. I could see the relief wash over his face when Dr. Myers confirmed that although my injuries were serious, they weren't life-threatening with proper care. "I should have been here sooner," he told me later, running a hand through his hair. "I should have questioned your mother's story immediately. A minor fender bender doesn't result in complex fractures and moderate concussions. I'm so sorry I accepted her version without checking in personally." The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. He kept glancing at my arm, the 4-line, the monitors, as if cataloging each thing he'd failed to protect me from. Dad's controlled demeanor cracked when he tried calling Mom and Dominic. His calls went straight to voicemail repeatedly, and the text messages remained unread. With each failed attempt, his jaw tightened. "They're deliberately ignoring me," he muttered, scrolling through his phone. Then his expression darkened as he pulled up Mom's Instagram account. But they're not too busy to post vacation photos. There on the screen was a fresh post. Mom, Dominic, and his sons smiling on a beach, cocktails in hand. The caption read, "Making the best of our family time despite some unexpected challenges. #blessed, #family first, #vacation mode." "Family first?" Dad said incredulously, his voice shaking with anger. "She abandoned her injured daughter in the hospital to pose for beach photos?" He set his phone down carefully, too carefully, like he was afraid of what he might do if he held onto it any longer. "This is beyond irresponsible, Eliza. This is neglect. Plain and simple. And I promise you, they will face consequences for this." For the next 3 days, Dad never left my side except to speak privately with doctors or make necessary calls. He arranged for time off work, contacting colleagues to cover his responsibilities. He slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair, waking whenever nurses came to check my vitals, and made sure I had everything I needed before I even asked. When it came time for discharge, Dad was emphatic about where I would recover. "You're coming home with me," he stated firmly. "There's no way you're going back to that house to be watched by some random babysitter Dominic hires." The relief I felt was overwhelming. "Are you sure? Don't you have to work?" "I've arranged to work remotely for the next 2 weeks," he explained, gathering my belongings. My daughter's health comes first. Always. Dad's apartment wasn't large, but he'd already converted his office into a temporary bedroom for me, with pillows arranged to support my injured arm and a small desk where I could set up my camera and laptop once I felt better. I know it's not much, he said apologetically. If you end up staying longer, we can look for a bigger place. The simple thoughtfulness of his preparations brought tears to my eyes. This was what parental love was supposed to look like. That evening, Dad made another attempt to contact Mom. This time, she answered. Nathan? Sorry I missed your calls. Her voice echoed through the speakerphone, background noise of music and laughter making it clear she was somewhere festive. We've been having so much fun celebrating Lucas's graduation. The resort is absolutely amazing. You should see the pictures I've posted. Dad's face turned stone cold. Vanessa, do you have any idea what you've done? His voice was unnervingly calm. You abandoned our daughter in the hospital after she underwent surgery for multiple fractures. She suffered a significant concussion that required neurological monitoring. And you left her completely alone to attend a beach party. Don't be so dramatic, Nathan, Mom scoffed. The hospital had excellent staff, and what you did constitutes medical neglect, Dad interrupted, his professional tone cutting through her excuses. I've already documented everything, including the doctor's statements about Eliza's condition and their shock at learning her mother left the country while she was under their care. Are you threatening me? Mom's voice sharpened. I'm informing you that I'll be filing for an emergency custody modification as soon as the courts open tomorrow morning. I'm also obligated as a medical professional to report this incident to Child Protective Services. Mom's voice turned panicky. You can't do that. It would ruin everything. My sponsorships, my brand. Think about what you're doing. I'm thinking about our daughter, Dad replied evenly. Something you clearly failed to do. After he hung up, my phone immediately lit up with messages from both Mom and Dominic. Rather than apologies, they were accusations. How could you do this to us, Eliza? Your father is completely overreacting, and you know it. All you had to do was keep quiet and let us enjoy this one vacation. Was that really too much to ask? We're cutting our trip short because of you. I hope you're satisfied with ruining Lucas's graduation celebration. Dominic's message was the worst. You've always been dramatic, but this takes the cake. All you had to do was stay quiet and follow the plan. Everything would have been fine if you hadn't gone crying to your father. You've deliberately thrown your mother and me under the bus. And for what? Attention? I showed Dad the messages, my hands trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. Don't respond, he advised, gently taking the phone. These are manipulation tactics. They're trying to make you feel guilty for their neglect. This is exactly why we need proper documentation and legal intervention. It's been 2 weeks since that night, and I've had a lot of time to think while recovering at Dad's place. Looking back now with some distance, I can see just how normalized the neglect had become in our household. For years, I accepted being pushed aside for Dominic and his son's convenience, believing things would eventually improve if I just tried harder, if I just complied more. I allowed myself to become invisible in my own home, and now I can hardly believe how much I tolerated. There were so many red flags I chose to ignore. Dominic constantly undermined my relationship with Dad, making snide comments about his career and character. Your father couldn't even keep a decent job in town, he'd say loud enough for me to hear. Had to run off to another city while I'm here stepping up as the real man in the family. He'd call Dad a glorified paper pusher compared to his real-world business experience in tech management. Mom never once defended Dad or asked Dominic to stop these comments. Whenever I tried sharing my feelings or concerns with Mom, Dominic would interject, dismissing everything I said. This is typical teenage girl drama, he'd announce with an eye roll. This is exactly why I thank God every day for blessing me with sons instead of daughters. Boys don't create these emotional scenes over nothing. The double standards were everywhere. If Lucas needed the latest gaming console for $500, Dominic would buy it immediately, calling it an investment in his future in digital technology. But when I asked Mom for $75 for a specialized camera lens for my photography class, Dominic interrogated me like I was applying for a bank loan. What's wrong with your phone camera? Why waste money on this artsy nonsense? Who's going to pay for the next thing you'll want? He'd drill me with questions, even though it was Dad's support money earmarked specifically for my educational expenses. Family activities always revolved around what Lucas and Ethan wanted to do. They'd plan entire weekends around Lucas's soccer tournaments or Ethan's gaming competitions. Meanwhile, when I had a photography exhibition at school, Mom showed up 30 minutes late and left early because Dominic needed help preparing for an important work presentation. My 16th birthday was particularly revealing. Mom and Dominic gave me a cheap makeup set from the drugstore, the exact kind Mom would never use herself because it clogs pores. That same month, they bought Lucas a MacBook Pro for getting a B+ in math. When I struggled with chemistry last semester, Dominic's response still stings. Some people just aren't academically inclined. Maybe focus on something easier. Instead of offering help or encouraging me, he suggested I was simply not smart enough. Mom sat silently by, scrolling through her phone, offering no support or contradiction to his assessment. I see now that what I experienced wasn't normal family dynamics. It was systematic emotional neglect, and the hospital incident was just the most extreme manifestation of a pattern that had been building for years. Dad went through with reporting Mom and Dominic to Child Protective Services. This wasn't a decision he made impulsively or out of spite. He deliberated carefully, consulting with both his hospital's legal counsel and a family attorney. This isn't about punishing your mother, he explained to me. It's about ensuring there's an official record of what happened and protecting you from future neglect. The CPS investigation began almost immediately after they returned from their abbreviated vacation. A caseworker named Ms. Reynolds contacted them for an in-depth interview regarding the circumstances of my hospitalization and their decision to leave me alone after surgery. According to Dad, they were completely blindsided, having convinced themselves their actions were reasonable. Ms. Reynolds later told me that the hospital staff's documentation had been particularly damning. The attending physicians and nurses had all noted their shock at a parent abandoning a minor with a serious concussion and post-surgical needs. The medical professionals all agreed that Mom and Dominic's decision had potentially jeopardized my recovery and well-being. The day after their CPS interview, Mom called me. I could tell immediately from her sharp tone that she wasn't calling to apologize or check on my recovery. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed, her voice trembling with anger rather than remorse. The CPS investigator made me sound like some kind of monster. This could seriously damage my reputation. Some of my sponsors are already asking questions about why I cut the vacation content short. Her priorities were crystal clear. Her social media presence was taking precedence over my well-being yet again. "This isn't my fault, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the knot forming in my stomach. "I didn't ask Dad to call CPS. But you're going to talk to them next," she continued, lowering her voice to an urgent whisper. "Listen to me very carefully, Eliza. When they interview you, you need to tell them this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. Say you encouraged me to go on the trip because you felt fine and didn't need supervision." I was stunned into silence. She wanted me to lie to Child Protective Services. "If you don't help me fix this, they could take you away permanently. Is that what you want? To never see me again?" Her voice cracked with what I initially thought was emotion, until she continued. "And think about what this will do to Dominic. His ex-wife is just looking for ammunition in their ongoing custody disputes. If she finds out about this CPS investigation, she'll use it against him with the boys. That's when it hit me. She hadn't asked once about how I was feeling or healing. Not a single question about my arm, my concussion symptoms, or my emotional state. Her only concerns were for her image and for Dominic's custody situation with Lucas and Ethan. "You need to be loyal to this family now, Eliza," she pressed when I didn't immediately agree. "After everything I've given you, all these years of my life, you owe me this much." Something inside me finally snapped. Loyal to this family? What family, Mom? The one that left me alone in a hospital bed after surgery. The one where Dominic's sons get expensive gifts while I get drugstore leftovers. The family that excludes me from every decision and activity. "You're being dramatic again," she started, but I cut her off. "I'm not going to lie to protect you or Dominic. When CPS asks me what happened, I'm telling them exactly how you both abandoned me without a second thought. I'm telling them how you cared more about Lucas's graduation dinner than your daughter's surgery. I'm telling them everything." There was a shocked silence before Mom's voice turned cold. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me lately, Mom? Name one thing. One single thing you've done that wasn't ultimately about yourself or Dominic or his sons." She couldn't answer. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said finally. "If that creates problems for you and Dominic, that's not my responsibility to fix. You're the adults. You made the choices." Mom exploded then, calling me selfish, manipulative, attention-seeking, every insult she could think of. I simply hung up the phone. It's been about a month since my conversation with CPS. I met with Ms. Reynolds at her office, where I provided a detailed account of not just the hospital incident, but the pattern of neglect I'd experienced since Mom married Dominic. I showed her text messages, photographs, and even some of my photography journal entries documenting how I'd been treated differently from Lucas and Ethan. For now, I'm staying with Dad permanently. He's been researching good schools in the area with strong arts programs that would support my photography interest. We visited 3 campuses last week, and I've already been accepted to Westlake Academy, which has an amazing digital media program. Living with Dad has been like learning what normal family life should feel like. He doesn't hover or control me, but he's genuinely interested in my day and my projects. When I'm working on a photo series, he asks thoughtful questions about my creative choices. When I need help with homework, he sits with me until I understand the material. Mom received an official warning from CPS with requirements to attend parenting classes and counseling sessions addressing her neglectful behavior and relationship with me. Dominic was also interviewed extensively, with the investigators noting his concerning pattern of preferential treatment toward his biological children and dismissive attitude toward me. CPS made it clear they would be monitoring the situation carefully if and when I had visitation with Mom and Dominic. Any further incidents of neglect or emotional harm would result in more serious consequences, possibly including supervised visitation only. I can't believe it's been 4 months since I moved in with Dad. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells or questioning my value as a person. The change has been incredible, not just in my living situation, but in how I see myself. Dad's apartment quickly became too small for both of us, so we found a townhouse closer to my new school. I have my own bedroom, plus a small alcove that Dad helped me convert into a photography studio with proper lighting and a backdrop system. He found most of the equipment secondhand, but it's professional quality and shows he really understands what matters to me. "Your talent deserves the right tools," he told me simply when I protested that it was too expensive. The best part about living with Dad is that I feel genuinely heard. I can tell him about my day, my worries, my dreams, and he actually listens, not just nodding while scrolling through his phone, but engaging and remembering details later. When I mentioned wanting to enter a photography contest, but feeling nervous about it, he helped me select my strongest pieces and even took time off work to drive me to the submission office. School is going well too. I've made some amazing friends who share my interest in visual storytelling. We're working on a collaborative documentary project about found families and chosen connections that feels deeply personal to me. My photography teacher has even suggested I start building a portfolio for college applications, saying several art schools would be interested in my perspective. Last month, I celebrated my birthday for the first time in years, the way I actually wanted to. No forced family dinner where Lucas and Ethan dominated the conversation. No awkward gifts that showed Mom and Dominic didn't know the first thing about my interests. Instead, I invited my new friends over, and we ordered pizza, made a ridiculous amount of popcorn, and watched these wonderfully awful romantic comedies from the 90s. Dad got me a vintage film camera I'd been eyeing for months, along with a year's worth of film processing at a professional lab. Mom's been texting more frequently lately with apologies and claims that she misses me. Part of me feels guilty about maintaining distance, but then I remember all the times she chose Dominic and his sons over me. I've made it clear that I'm not ready to return to any regular visitation schedule, and while she continues reaching out, I've established firm boundaries. Her actions caused real harm, and until she takes full responsibility without excuses, I can't open myself up to that dynamic again. As for Dominic, he's made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge his behavior. Not that I'm surprised. In all the time I lived under his roof, he never once demonstrated genuine concern for my well-being or happiness. I'll never forget how eagerly he left me in that hospital room, more worried about Lucas's graduation dinner than whether I'd recover properly from surgery. I don't particularly care if he ever changes. I'm not waiting around to find out. The most important lesson from all this has been learning to value myself and recognize who truly cares about me. I used to try so hard to make Mom and Dominic notice me, to earn a place in their family. Now I realize I don't need to earn basic respect and consideration. I deserve it simply by existing. I'm focusing my energy on my photography, my education, and building relationships with people who see me for who I actually am. My latest photo series explores the contrast between public personas and private realities, something I understand all too well from witnessing Mom's carefully curated social media life versus our dysfunctional home environment. Sometimes healing means walking away from the people who were supposed to protect you. And that's okay.